Today we're going to work with my power steering. So in conjunction with the winch bumper, putting the winch in here, nice flush with the grill, I had to move the orbital valve and a couple of hoses, and while I'm at it, I'm going to upgrade my power steering cooler. I was running just this little 4-pass guy, something you grab at a junkyard off of a car like I did. The problem that I found was that since my XJ still has these stock cooling fans, it's a mechanical fan on the driver's side, passenger side. The driver's side has an electric fan, which means that my trans cooler here was always getting flow from the engine-driven fan, but the power steering cooler over here only gets flow when the electric fan turns on, which in my Jeep honestly isn't that much. So to combat that, I'm going to put in a larger cooler. It's not only physically larger, but it's also a different style. It's got more passages, which means more surface area, more chance for it to dissipate heat over the smaller cooler. And to go with it, I've also got an electric fan. So we're going to mount these two in here, and I've got all the relays, switches, accessories. I've also got a thermostat, so this fan is going to run automatically. I don't have to turn it on and off. And all this is going to mount where the old cooler was, right behind the grill, really sleek. So first thing we're going to do is we've got to add a couple of bars to my existing structure to mount this new cooler. I've got 2 new fittings and 2 NPT hoses, 36 inches long, 3 ace ends on them. This is all from Surplus Center, order it online. Pretty much my whole steering is from Surplus Center. You know, the ram, the hoses, fittings, the orbital I bought off eBay for like $100, and there's a little bit of math you have to do to make sure you're sizing the orbital correctly along with your ram, or else you're gonna get either steering that takes too many turns to go from side to side, or too little turns. There's a sweet spot of like 2 to 3 turns lock to lock that you're looking for. And then one of the reasons I picked NPT hoses instead of JIC hoses is because these you can find at any like farm store, a Tractor Supply, Family Farm and Home, something like that. So if you're out on the trail and you cut a line, you don't have a spare, you just need to get in your tow rig and run to town, and that Tractor Supply is going to carry pre-cut lengths of this NPT hose, and it'll get you back on the trail. Taking apart this whole system has kind of been a disaster. It's like the Exxon Valdez over here, just oil everywhere. Everything you touch is covered in oil. I actually accidentally started the Jeep the other day, forgetting that none of the hoses were hooked up, and I shot oil across the shop over my Dodge, and it just plastered the side of the wall with oil, and it's been a nightmare. Okay, so the mounts are done. I also welded some little feet on it just to get it spaced out correctly. The fan is going to mount right on top of it. They're sandwiched right on top of each other, so you're going to get good airflow across the cooler, and it's not going to leak out of sides or things like that. And there's no need for a shroud, really. This fan is kind of the perfect size for this cooler, honestly. And what was nice was that the mounting holes for the fan line up with the mounting holes for the cooler. So that was a nice touch. Just kind of got lucky on that one, honestly. So I'm ready to hook up the lines now, and then we can bleed the steering system. The last thing I need to install is this thermostat. This is also by Derail, and this is what's going to allow the fan to turn on and off automatically. So this little switch has just got 2 wires on it, and when the fluid hits, I believe it's 185 degrees, this switch will close, allow power to go across the terminals, and then that'll go to a relay, which will kick on the fan. And then when the fluid drops below 160 or 165, I think it is, that switch will open. You'll no longer get power across these, and the fan will turn off. So this is what allows your fan to run automatically. So I've got some room to mount this just behind the headlight. I'm gonna splice it into the line that's coming into the cooler, not the outlet. You want this on the inlet. And then once it's spliced in there, I'll just clamp it down, secure it down, and we can bleed the system. I think the moment of truth now is gonna be if my measurements were correct and if the grill still fits on. Oh, it's tight, but I think it fits. All right, the grill's on and everything just barely fits. The only reason this is possible, is because my Jeep doesn't have AC, so the AC condenser, which would normally sit where these 2 coolers have been mounted, isn't there anymore. So that's what gave me all this free real estate to mount these 2 coolers and an extra fan. Okay, one last thing before filling up the system. I use my engine hoist to pick up the front of the Jeep, and I'm resting on the limit straps right now, so this is as far as the suspension will droop, not accounting for any stretch in those straps. But what I'm checking for is to make sure my 2 new hoses have plenty of slack. You don't want those to go taut and rip out when your suspension droops out, and I still have plenty of extra hose left, and even if those straps stretch on a really hard drop, there's still plenty of excess there, so we won't have any problems in the future. So I bled the system with the engine off to turn the wheel back and forth, and I go and I turn the engine on to try and bleed it with the engine's power, and the pump immediately starts squealing. I can't turn, something's wrong, so I shut it off and I inspect my work. Well, I hooked up 2 of my lines backwards. I even made myself a diagram. When I took the pump off, I marked where each hose went, and I still reversed 2 of the hoses. So now I gotta take all the hoses back off, and the orbital probably has to come out because I can't actually reach the fittings when it's in the vehicle, so not happy. Okay, so I took everything apart, switched those 2 fittings, and have it all plumbed back the way it should be. So now what I've done is I took the belt off, and I'm gonna just use a drill with a little wire wheel and spin the pump. And you can see when I do that, it's going to circulate fluid, help bleed it out. When the engine's running, even if you're not turning the wheel, if it's totally straight, this thing is still circulating fluid through the cooler back up to the reservoir. So by doing this, it's just going to help bleed it out, and it's not hard on the pump. If you start the engine, maybe the thing accidentally runs dry while you're doing it. If you're doing it right here with the drill, you can watch the level the whole time. So once I've got this pretty well bled, then I'll go into the Jeep and just turn the wheel back and forth, and that'll help bleed out the ram and the lines. And then once that's done, I'll put the belt back on and start it and see if everything works this time. that's it for this install. We got the orbital moved up further on the frame so it clears the winch and also gets my lines and everything up so they're not hanging down low in the way of rocks. We got the new cooler mounted, the bigger cooler, and there's a fan on top of it. The fan isn't wired yet. I'm going to take care of that in a later video along with the wiring for some rock lights, and I'm wiring an in-cab winch controller so I can run the winch all from the driver's seat. So this is just continuing to bleed out the system. It's honestly just a lot of back and forth with the wheel, and then you can use a drill to help bleed the system like I like to do. That way you don't just start the engine and let the pump run dry accidentally. My pump is also struggling a little bit. It just seems a lot weaker than it used to be. It's just a stock XJ pump. So I think I'm going to put a new pump on it here pretty soon, but I'm probably going to go with a stock pump again. That way, if I ever need a new one and I'm out on the trail, we can just run to a parts store and get another stock replacement. It's not going to be a big hassle looking for fittings or looking for this custom pump maybe. So it seems like a pretty good solution to me. So stick around, and in the next video or two I should finish up the winch install and also take care of some of this wiring.